Yes, now we're good.
I'd like to start the meeting with the pledge of allegiance. Nick, would you like to lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. We would like to welcome you all and those people in the audience online, presenters, to the Thursday, October 24th, 2024, Bellingham Planning Board meeting. We have two articles tonight that will appear on the town warrant. Can you talk about the town warrant process and why we're here this evening?
Sure. Before we get into the two warrant articles, it might make sense to just, actually, no, we can continue the other public hearings after. Sorry, never mind.
Okay.
Yeah, so tonight there are two warrant articles on the agenda, and just to be clear on what's happening tonight, so these are regarding two zone changes or proposed zone changes that are going to be on the town meeting warrant, or they are on the town meeting warrant. So we are required to have a public hearing process with the planning board for any type of zone change. So this is an info session essentially to discuss any input from the public and to give input or basically give information to the public that about the zone changes as well. So with that, these aren't getting voted on tonight. It's voted on at the town meeting, whether or not these get adopted into our zoning bylaws. The only vote that happens is whether or not the planning board votes to recommend or not recommend to the town meeting, but these are on the warrant regardless. So that basically is the process, if that makes sense.
The first item is going to be the warrant article for the MBTA Community Overlay District. Dennis, do you have anything you want to add to our discussion this evening?
I think the committee members are here that can speak to the MBTA overlay and answer any questions that you might have. I
Okay.
know Liz has chaired that committee and done a phenomenal job, and we certainly appreciate that. So I don't want to steal your thunder. You've done all the work.
I think it's Rob's thunder, but thank you, Dennis.
Rob, can you-
Yeah, so I know that there's a few people in the audience that came specifically for the MBTA Communities Law, which I have a presentation that I have. I can go over it briefly. This is actually from the October 15th outreach meeting, and this is actually also going to be presented at town meeting. By a show of, there are people in the audience that are interested in the MBTA stuff tonight. Okay, good. All right, there are people. So I was going to say, if there's nobody in the audience, I can go a very brief overview, but I will go into detail so everybody has the information here. But hopefully everybody can see that. So basically what has occurred, a subcommittee was formed earlier this year to try and figure out a solution for the state mandate that was put on us. I believe it dates back to 2021, when this legislation was first put in place. So what I have here is just a brief overview of the regulations themselves and how Bellingham is trying to get into compliance with these regulations. So before I get started, I just want to do a quick shout out to the subcommittee volunteers, which Liz Bertholet, who's also on the ZBA, and our associate member is here. She's the chair of the subcommittee. Bill O'Connell, the planning board chair, is on the subcommittee. Sahan Shaheen from the select board, and also Jeff Skornavaca is on the subcommittee, and have worked very hard to come up with a solution to try and meet the state regulations and also try and figure out a way that meeting the regulations aren't going to create substantial impacts to the residents of Bellingham. So you might be wondering, what is this law that was passed? So this was part of the 2021 Economic Development Bill. And it's a zoning requirement that applies to 177 cities and towns around Boston. The reason why it's being called MBTA Communities Law is because the regulations are based on the proximity to MBTA stations. I know that there was some discussions when this first started happening that some people thought, is this MBTA law mean that we're adding an MBTA station to Bellingham? That's not the case at all. It's just because the regulations are based on proximity to the MBTA stations. And the intent of this law is to reduce the regulatory barriers for multifamily housing that's in place in most cities and towns. So the reason why Bellingham is considered an MBTA community, we don't have an MBTA station in Bellingham. But the reason why the communities are in these regulations or why they apply is you have communities that host the actual transit, rapid transit or commuter rails. And then you have communities that abut the actual MBTA stations, which we abut the MBTA stations in Franklin. So that's why we are considered an adjacent community towards the, for these regulations. And on here, this is just a map of the 177 cities and towns that are also included in these regulations. They're color coded. The greenish color are communities that have these stations. The brownish colors are the adjacent ones, which is what Bellingham is. So because we're considered an adjacent community, we need to comply by the end of this year. That's the regulations. And the basic requirements are, we need to create a zoning overlay that allows multifamily high-density zoning, meaning 15 units per acre as of right. So not through a special permit process through the planning board or zoning board of appeals. There isn't an age restriction. There isn't any regulations that can be placed regarding number or size of bedrooms. It also can't restrict occupants, whether they're family or not, and the number that can reside in these units. Since we are an adjacent community, there's no distance requirement that this needs to be placed next to an MBTA station. And then the district, they say, needs to be of a reasonable size, which is, in our case, the regulations state that it needs to be 50 acres, which I'll go into a little bit more into that a little bit later. The law does not require that the required density actually is built. It just requires that the zoning is put in place. That is the requirement. So there's no production requirement for the new development. It also does not require Bellingham to pay for any of the infrastructure required for a development. This doesn't override the Wetlands Protection Act or Title V. Title V is regarding septic regulations. And then this also doesn't provide options for waivers or exemptions. So in order to make a conforming district, we need to allow a minimum gross density of 15 units per acre on developable land. And each community has a minimum unit capacity that is mandated by the state. So for Bellingham, we are a 750 unit capacity. That's what we are, that is what we need to allow. The district itself, so it's 50 acres is the number, or is the size of the district or the overlay. At least half of the district needs to be contiguous. So we need to have at least a full 25 acre overlay. And then for the other 25 acres, if you wanted to split and do multiple, you can do other areas, but they have to be at least 5 acres. So you can't just do 1 acre parcels here and there. And as I mentioned, the requirements are that this needs to be allowed by right, so you can't require a special permit. However, you can allow the developments to be subject through a site plan review process, which is what we have in our article. So there would be a required site plan approval process through the planning board with different regulations or stipulations that a developer would have to meet. With that. So just to kind of go over this again. 750 units is the minimum unit capacity, minimum district size is 50 acres, and that gross density is 15 units per acre. So 750 units divided by 50 acres is 15 units per acre. So as far as why we should comply, basically the state has stated that if you don't comply and you're not in conformance by the deadline, you do lose access to grants, state funds, I should say. So these are just some of the ones that Bellingham has utilized just recently: Mass Works, Mass DOT grants for different roadway improvements. There's also this Transportation Improvement Program, a TIP program, which is a lot of money that is utilized also for roadway and infrastructure improvements. But it's not just our roads. There's also school funding, and public safety has funds as well. So, and then the other issue too, the Attorney General has issued an advisory letter stating that if you're not in compliance, not only do you lose the potential for the grants, but you're also going to be subject to civil enforcement. So there is some legal components to this too that definitely states why we should comply. So, oh yeah, and steps taken so far. So just briefly, there's been a lot of meetings with the subcommittee dating back to January of 2024. We do have a consultant, Barrett Planning Group, that is on board, that has assisted us with drafting our language and also doing compliance modeling to make sure that we are meeting the intent of the regulations. And back in June, we had our first round of public outreach meetings with what what the subcommittee deemed as a solution. And then October of this year, so October 15th, which was last week, I think. Yeah, that we had our second round of outreach meetings as well. So we're here now with the, the public hearing because we have the warrant article in place. So the big question is how are we going to comply with this? Where are these district locations? So if you look on this map, the Zoom box is not in a good place. So there's two areas that the subcommittee has located. There's this red circle here, which that is over the Curtis Apartments and a few adjoining parcels. And then we also have another parcel here, which is the Charles, which is off of North Main Street. So this is the North Main Street parcel. So this is North Main Street. And this purple outline is the overlay, which encompasses 49 acres. The modeled unit capacity for our density is 409 units, and the gross density is 18.9 units per acre. So if I go to this next slide, this blue outline is the same overlay, or the same border of the overlay. You can see this is the Charles Apartments here. And then there's another parcel that wraps around. Now, a good portion of that parcel in the rear is wetlands, which is not developable, and there's no bypassing the Wetlands Protection Act. So in order to meet the regulations, we need an additional area, which we have over the Curtis Apartments, which is this other overlay. So this is Mechanic Street. And actually, let me go to this is 18.5 acres, and the modeled unit capacity is 369 units. But this kind of tells the story. So this is the Curtis Apartments in this area. And there are 3 additional parcels along Mechanic Street as well that are included in this. So those are the 2 areas that we have pinpointed. Now, with those areas, we meet the minimum requirements for the 50 acres, the unit yield, and the unit density. We're a little bit over, which our consultant mentioned that that's a good thing to do, just in case you need a little wiggle room when you're going through compliance with the state. Now, I think this is the last, yeah, that's the last slide, but we'll open this up for questions from the board or the public, but before we start, I just want to mention, because there's been some confusion as far as there's this 750 unit yield capacity that's going over existing high density development. So the biggest question has been, can we utilize that same unit count from the Curtis Apartments and the Charles, which I believe is about 550 units, I believe.
560.
560. So 560 units in total. Can we utilize that to the 750 units and say, okay, now we just need to create zoning that allows for this additional unit count? The answer is no, because it's a zoning exercise to basically allow 750 units by right. Now, the intent of putting this over those the two existing high density housing developments is, with the Curtis being just recently constructed, it's very unlikely that a developer would demolish that development and build a brand new development to meet the 750 unit count. However, we are providing opportunities for developers to utilize the area that could be developed to meet the intent of the regulations. So the intent from the subcommittee was to meet the regulations. Can we put this in an area that already has high density housing to lessen the impact of the Bellingham residents? That was the intent of this, and I just want to make that clear, so if anybody has any questions. I think that covers it for the most part. I don't know, Dennis, or.
Yeah, just if I could add one thing.
Yeah,
I think at the beginning, the thought was we were going to have to take vacant land, identify it for MBTA housing, and provide zoning that would allow for the construction of 750 units. As the process evolved, our deadline is December 31st of this year to basically adopt some sort of zoning. This was enacted, as Rob said, in 2021.
yes,
So it's been around for a little while. We intentionally delayed moving forward with this. We put the committee together a year ago to see how things would evolve, and they have evolved quite a bit. Whereas we're able to use, as Rob said, existing high density zoning that already contains between the two, I think you're right, it is 550 units, 550 units. So we're already 550 towards our 750 units. If the Curtis Apartments decides that, you know, they want to build another facility, or another building at their property, they have to come before the planning board and present that. They own those parcels in front where the Mass Diesel was and the other garages that are there. So they have those under agreement. So theoretically, that could happen. In the other parcel where the Charles is, there's enough property to the side, to the south side of that, where they probably could build one more unit of similar to what they have there. Whether or not they do it or not, we don't know. But the good thing is these are areas that already have high density zoning. We're not putting it in a neighborhood where it's going to impact, you know, we're gonna have to look at traffic all over again, or these types of things. And whether or not these developers actually move forward and do something there remains to be seen. Theoretically, you know, no, I don't think anybody's gonna tear anything down. They look to use additional land on that site, and the maximum exposure for the town would be about 218 units. So it's a long way from the 750 that we were looking at 2 or 3 years ago. So I think the committee did a great job getting from where we were all a little panic stricken, to where we are today, where we can have compliance. It's a reasonable location, and it's not gonna overwhelm us. from a service
Rob, can
perspective.
you, mention the height restrictions as well?
Yeah, so the other item too with these overlays is that there is a dimensional requirement that's in the warrant article. And with that, there's height restrictions as well as setback restrictions. And what we did was kept those requirements the same as what you see now. And why that's critical is there was a lot of discussion during some of these outreach meetings of, well, what if the Curtis decides they want to add 5 more stories up? And that's not allowed through the zoning. So they would have to meet I think it's 4 stories for the Curtis and 3 stories for the Charles district. So, and that all came about with conversations with public safety because you don't want to add larger high rises that require specialty equipment for fire safety or different types of policing. So, anyway,
What I think I like to do now. Yes. Anything you want to say, Liz?
No, I think Rob and Dennis covered it. Thank you.
Before you hear from, the board, I'll open up to the public. Any questions you may have? Yes, sir.
Couple of them. One, would you explain by right?
Yeah.
And second, when you said the state would help with the support of infrastructure. What is infrastructure by definition? And is the support for 1 year only or continuous support for infrastructure? For example, if part of the infrastructure means support for fire, police, DPW, is it ongoing support for 1 year?
sure. So first for the by right, that refers to, if you look at our zoning table, there's basically when you look at the uses in the districts, things are either allowed with yes or not allowed, which is no. There's also requirements where you have to go through special criteria with either the planning board or the zoning board of appeals, or in some cases, select board. Those are through special permits. It's mostly special permits. Variances are different, but what this is requiring is that you don't allow a special permit process through the planning board or ZBA or select board. It's just, this is allowed. Now, what they are allowing is a development plan approval process, which the town of Bellingham currently has that in place. And that's tripped if I think it's a disturbance over 10,000 square feet, or you're changing from residential to a commercial use. There's different things, but this would be required to meet the criteria of the development plan approval. And that's where the stormwater, the infrastructure, the traffic, the density requirements, that's where that all would be reviewed. So that's the difference between by right and special permit essentially. And then regarding the infrastructure, so the law doesn't require the town to basically put money towards any infrastructure improvements. It doesn't mean that the state's gonna fund it. It would really fall on the developer. So, for example, there may or may not be a project in town that is potentially going to utilize a pump station that needs to be reviewed. That's the same process here, that if a developer wants to utilize infrastructure in the road and they need to increase the capacity, it's not going to be on the town to basically improve the infrastructure. It's the developer that's going to have to.
So if it was a drain on water or sewer systems, then the developer would take care of that.
Correct. So, that's why in a lot of cases, you'll see with development, they'll do something called water looping to keep the water quality better. That, the town isn't going to be required to install water lines so a developer can utilize this zoning. The developer has to do it. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Thank you for going to the senior center. Several of you were at the senior center for a brief.
Oh, yeah,
Make
yeah.
us acquainted with it.
Yeah.
And it was generally appreciated by everybody that was there.
Good. I appreciate that.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Start with the woman on the left first, and I'll get back to the gentleman in the middle. Hi, can you please state your name and address?
It's Megan Korea, and I live at 417 Maplebrook Road.
Okay,
So, if this has already been covered, I apologize. I'm curious how, all this influx of humans that is needed is part of the package, affordable housing as well, so it really does meet the range of needs of different types of families?
So excellent question, and that is part of what is the state regulations do allow for an affordable component. So we have, I think it's 10%, and we have incorporated that into this overlay as well as the affordable component, and that does a couple things. It does allow the give availability for, more housing choice, but also helps protect our what's called the safe harbor, which is our subsidized housing inventory. So there's two really good benefits to doing that. And the more housing you add, the more your safe harbor goes down without adding the additional 10%. So, but yes, so Yeah.
So with the influx of people, I'm assuming we've addressed our police station, our, first responders need and support to manage all of the new people that are coming, because all the new people that are coming are all bringing their stuff, their baggage. Because I hear the fire, I hear the police sirens every now and again. So I just would like to just make sure that our policemen are being supported, our fire department is being supported, and they're given the resources to address whatever needs are brought with the extra people.
thank you.
yeah, yep. Thank you.
So is that a yes or a no?
Yeah, so, yeah,
Yeah.
Or is that,
To answer the,
to be
yeah,
spoken of
to
later?
to answer the question, it's always challenging. Schools as well. More
Right.
children coming into the school system, although our school population has leveled off. It was declining for a while. It's pretty much level. Fortunately, the residents of Bellingham supported an initiative back in May, which allowed the fire department to hire 8 additional paramedics to the fire department. So that was a huge benefit. Police have had a few positions added, but that's always a challenge. There's no question about it as we grow, trying to make sure that we have adequate public safety, schools, infrastructure improvements. So, yeah, so we have made some gains, but there's many more to be had.
It's always
Yeah,
a challenge, it's always a journey,
Yep.
right?
absolutely.
So I just brought up just to
Yeah.
say, is it on everybody's mind,
Oh,
and is it like always part of a parking lot kind of like subject? All right, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
you.
Appreciate your question. Mr.
Um,
Hall.
So I thought I heard you say that we'd ask the question of the state. Does the Curtis and the Charles current units count? And the answer was no.
Mhm.
But then, I'm just confused. I thought, Mr. Frame, didn't you say that we only have to add another 200? So
Well, it's
do
not
they count or they don't?
necessarily numbers, and Rob can speak to it. What we're doing is we're taking the parcel of land
Yeah.
that, say, the Curtis is on,
Yeah.
and we're saying on that parcel of land, you can build so many units, whatever the number of units were for the Charles. That's how many they can build, period. And by build or occupy is probably a better word for it. So occupying on the Charles, we've already got 292 units. So on the Charles property, they have a capacity of 369.
That's
There's
the
already
Curtis.
292 there. That's the Curtis. What's the Charles?
So I just, simply, are we on the hook for 750 units or 200 more
Well, we're
units?
actually not on the hook for anything.
Well, yeah,
Yes.
I know what I'm getting.
I think I can clarify so the zoning is going to allow 750 units by right. So what I was referring to was as far as demolishing, like right here for the Charles, for example, we have 409 units that would be allowed for the density. So the Charles, if they want, they can bulldoze their property and they can build 409 units if they wanted to with the zoning. What I think Dennis was stating was that it's very unlikely that that is going to happen. So if you have that density in place already and you're only allowed 409 units, then that is what you have to work with essentially. So the key thing here too is that you make a really good point about what are we on the hook for? And that was the biggest misconception by even the subcommittee. We thought that this was a production requirement, not zoning. We thought we've got to build 750 units or the state's is gonna come down on us. And it's not, it's just a zoning exercise, but we have to be very careful because as you can imagine, with a density like that, with a very high density and allowed by right, it's gonna be very, very appealing to developers. Fortunately, Bellingham's in a pretty unique situation compared to some other towns that we already have a couple high density residential areas. So that's where we thought, well, let's capitalize on that as much as we can. Other than, there are some towns, actually some bordering towns that they wanted to put this on undeveloped land that was kind of set aside away from like the big metropolitan area of their community. And it was met with a lot of aggravation early on because people said, well, okay, we add 750 units, we're gonna have a pretty big impact to this area that doesn't have very good roads or infrastructure.
So we can basically be in compliance with those two parcels.
This
one
is
here.
in compliance. Our consultant has said we are in
Yes.
compliance. A grant from the state has paid for the consultant and they've worked with at least half a dozen communities around us. I think Holliston is one of them.
Yep.
So,
And
you know, they have ensured that we are in compliance with this plan.
So it's it's the least intrusive sort of.
And we're not the only community that's doing this. I think Chelmsford and Shrewsbury have come out with a similar plan, or I've heard, meeting minutes from their planning boards as well. So I don't think we're alone in that sense, and it remains to be seen how this will be received, once it goes through the process, but there's over 100 towns who need to be in compliance by the end of the year, so.
yeah,
This seemed to be the best path forward for the subcommittee, once we realized we could overlay on top of existing real estate. And again, we confirmed how many times with Sarah that this was in compliance.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Simply, it's overlay districts.
Yeah.
For the thing that's underneath it.
Yeah.
And we try to make it as least impactful
Yeah.
on the town of Bellingham.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Any questions from the board? I know we have, 3 people that have been on most of the meetings.
Not to put the cart before the horse, but if this thing goes through and developers decide to take full advantage of it, has there been any sense of how, this would affect our resources, i.e. our water, our sewer? Or was that, too early to think of something that hasn't happened yet? Because that's a lot of potential homes,
definitely, yeah.
and a lot of stress on our water and sewer systems, and I'm just curious, so.
Yeah, and we did have this discussion early on, really to site the overlay in the best possible area. And that was another reason that these areas would be more beneficial to utilize for this, because we do have a strain on, our water, our pumping stations and, sewer pump stations as well as sewer capacity. So utilizing what's already in place that has already been constructed would be very beneficial for this. Cause I don't know if you put this in an area that would require, more infrastructure, more water that would need to be drawn from the aquifer, as well as more capacity for sewer. The issue that we have is that the state has essentially mandated that this is by right. So you're limited on really what you can and can limit based on the infrastructure that's in place, if that makes sense.
So are you saying we're limited in terms of what the mandate is, regardless of what our capacity is?
Correct. So what I'm trying to get at is that if this was an undeveloped parcel and somebody built up 750 units, and there's all of a sudden this concern about, drawing of water and, sewer capacities or something, we don't foresee what the state is going to allow Bellingham to state to the developer, this is what needs to happen. You know what I mean? It's because it's by right. So, that's why, like the Curtis, for example, has a lot of infrastructure that was installed as part of the project. So it's much less of an issue than, if you were to put this in some field somewhere in Bellingham.
But at the end of the day, if there is additional housing put up,
Yeah,
the town's not gonna be in a position where, because of the mandate and because of what may or may not be put up, that we're not able to provide the resources and infrastructure. The state's not gonna say, too bad. deal with it.
no, and that's where, like the utilities and impact or the utility design, which will have to, the capacities will have to be calculated and shown that they comply. That's all part of that, the development plan approval process. So. Sorry, I'm going.
No, that's okay.
That was a long-winded answer. That, yeah.
So I did have a question on, goes in that direction, but the typical process that the planning board would use relies on peer reviews for traffic, stormwater, et cetera.
Yep.
And those are usually paid for by the applicant.
Yep.
Things like, I noticed there's notification notices that are in this. Are the mechanisms for paying for these things still on the applicants, even with this laws that are in place behind it?
Yeah, yes, it is,
Okay.
and that's because even for other developments that are by right that go in front of the planning board, which happens very often, we always require a peer review, and yes, that is also
Still
allowed through
okay.
this process. Thank goodness.
No, it's
Yeah.
actually, we rely on the
Yep.
expertise of a lot of outside individuals. to
Yep.
help guide us. So thank you.
I've been on the board, so I don't have any questions.
So could you go back to the Curtis for a second?
Yeah.
The plan.
This one or the other one?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
So I think the low hanging fruit in terms of what could be developed almost immediately would be those three parcels on 140.
Yes.
Do you have any sense of what kind of, assuming that those lots are consolidated, what kind of structure could go there?
So. That's a good question. So with the process, we have other requirements too, which include parking provisions. So you can't just say, I'm not gonna do parking, but I'm gonna add a bunch of units. There is a requirement for parking, as well as the biggest thing with the Curtis would be the additional impervious area associated with stormwater and that sort of design, which is obviously all included as part of this site plan review. So, I can't definitively tell you what could or couldn't go there, but I feel very confident in saying that really the limits of what is available would probably be, you'd probably be able to accommodate one additional building in that area with the parking, the infrastructure, the stormwater containment.
But the maximum exposure of is 119 units. because they've already got 250 there, right?
Yes,
Yeah, so it's the difference between the two, what they have and what they can build. You just had it on the previous slide.
yeah. So,
I don't think they could get 119.
I don't either.
Is it about 80 units?
I don't know what the
in an
building,
existing-
what the unit count is. I know the Curtis went in actually before I was on the
It's
planning
like
board.
250. The Curtis.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, yeah.
yeah, I'm saying per building was the question.
And I think for everybody, maybe you all know it's not, this is redundant, but special permits give the planning board a tad bit more subjectivity in allowing a project. There's also the ability to sort of say, hey, what about litigation? In the building, what is it called? They have to do a review, what's that called?
Peer review?
Not peer review. They have to submit what to get this, yeah,
Building permit? I'm sorry.
they have, instead of a special permit, they have to seek a
Oh, development plan approval.
development plan review. That's more of a checkbox. Do they have this? Yes. Do they have that? Yes. Do they have that? And that's it. So that's the distinction between seeking a special permit, which we all kind of love. And we can control a little bit more versus a checkbox where we say, okay, they complied with setbacks, they complied with this and all of it. That's where the town loses a little bit of control.
Or we still have some.
A little bit, yeah.
And I know you're at First Liberty meeting.
I just have a question for Rob. Rob, can you touch on, what happens at town meeting? How many votes are needed for the town to adopt this?
This one is a simple majority vote.
Right? And then following town meeting, what actually takes place? Does the state review this?
Yes.
What is the process?
Yeah, so hopefully, so we can get in compliance, this would get voted upon and approved at town meeting. Eventually, well, not eventually, immediately after, we will submit our package with our consultant to the state for review, which is basically reviewed by the Attorney General, which they review any zone change regardless, but they're also gonna want to review for compliance with the regulations specifically to this MBTA 3A zoning. And then I believe also the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities also reviews this. And essentially, once the green light is given from them, we are in compliance essentially. So it could take a while for them to review this and actually give us the approval. The main objective is for us to get the vote and submit this to the state, because technically you're in, well, I don't want to say you're in compliance then.
This is not,
Yeah, it's not approved, but you know, it's now on the state to do their review, so. It is our understanding that, you know, grants, funding, that's not going to be at risk in the meantime. We're meeting the intent of the regulations, and it's the state that has to review this. So.
any other questions from the board?
Maybe this was already explained and I'm just not getting it. So between the Curtis area and the Charles, 750 units have to be built. Is that correct?
No,
No.
we have to allow for 750 units to be built. They don't have to be built, we just have to allow through zoning that it gives the developer an
Okay,
opportunity.
so it's just the zoning that to make you compliant with the state?
Correct, yep, and
It's
there's,
not the providing of,
correct, there is no production requirement for now.
right now.
Yeah, but,
This is Massachusetts.
Oh, yeah, so,
yeah, there's no requirement that these get built.
so does that necessarily mean you will get developers that will want to build there?
It's up to the property owner to, if they decide that they want to develop the property and utilize the.
So
zone.
Charles is the property owner from behind them, is that correct?
I believe so.
Now there's the Curtis, because we live one street over from there, which is scary to me, to think that you're gonna go back or just to the side.
Hold on, the Charles or the Curtis,
The
sorry.
Curtis.
The Curtis, okay,
We live on, right off Maple Brook Road.
yep. So the limits of that overlay, you can see in blue. Here, any development that utilizes the zoning has to be within that box.
Oh, okay.
So if the concern is that there will be development closer to, I know this is the condominium complex back here. They can't go past the current property line. And it's essentially developed already to that property line, so there's really not an area to expand upon there if they were to keep their buildings, which is what we would most.
There is woods behind there, and across the street from where we live,
Yeah.
there is woods there.
Not
No
within that
buildings.
box, though.
Yeah, that's owned by the condo association, I believe.
No, no, not across the street, not on the, we live on the corner of Maplebrook Road and Old Bridge Lane. New development, been there 7 years. So across the street from us is woods.
If
There are
it's
no
not in the
buildings
box,
there.
if it's not in the box, it's not affected by this.
It's not to be, I don't need to be concerned about it if it's not in the box.
Well, you should be concerned about it, but that is the box in which this development could go. And just to pick up on your point, will this be developed? Absolutely. It's a legislative gift to these landowners that they now can construct a much more dense project in a smaller footprint. They can build many more units than they could have otherwise. So this is a legislative gift to these people. And there's an incredible financial incentive to take advantage of that. And I'm for sure those 3 lots will be developed, for sure.
So I think there's more buildings there than what you're showing. I think there's 5 apartment buildings there, 4 stories each.
Yeah,
There are
that's,
five.
there's 5 here.
Five there.
There's 5.
Yeah, this
And the
is
community
1,
center.
2, 3, 4, 5, and then this is the lease center here.
And garages on the left-hand side
That's over here.
and in the back.
Yep, over here and back here.
I mean, I just saying that because we live in that area.
Yep.
And we appreciate your question. But one of the things that made this area attractive was that blue box. That would have least impact on the residents of Bellingham. Any other questions? I would entertain a motion to move forward by the board.
So you would be voting to recommend or not to recommend to the town, the fall town meeting.
Well, I would move to recommend the warrant article to the fall town meeting.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Made and seconded. On the floor. Any further discussion?
The only last thing I would say is, I commend everybody that's been part of this process and putting this together. It wasn't easy, and a lot of hard decisions have to be made, and I think it's good as it's gonna be, so thank you all for doing it.
I just want to thank the public that have been here this evening and at our outreach sessions. And there will be another presentation on the floor of the town meeting. We'll have another chance to ask questions. Any other comments? I would like to call for the vote and also use it as attendance.
Nick, aye.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye.
Bill,
Steve, I.
That motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Our next item this evening. Rob, can you bring us up to speed?
So this is the second warrant article, or I should say zoning warrant article for the fall town meeting for an energy resource overlay district, which Dennis, I don't know if you want to kick off to kind of explain how,
Just
why
kind
we're
of,
here.
yeah, so I can start on that, the energy overlay, district, article is something that the select board is putting forward. The select board's been involved with energy storage initiatives for about 6 years now. We've had QRFPs that we have put out looking to attract companies interested in, building energy storage facilities on town-owned property. the latest RFP that we put out ended up being a solar project, the one that this board I know is very familiar with off of Williams Way. It has very small energy storage there, located there. About a year ago, we were approached by a company that is Hectate Energy that is proposing a project and actually is very far through the permitting process with Medway. It's a combined total of approximately 800 megawatts. We'll get the specific number in a few minutes of battery storage between the two towns. The Bellingham would be 440 megawatts of energy storage, and the Medway side is about 300 megawatts of battery energy storage. So we're talking about the overlay tonight and whether or not it'll be recommended, but obviously the public and the board wants to know, what does this mean? If we were to look at approving this overlay district, and we have a brief presentation from Hectate Energy, who we have been working with and actually entered into a host community agreement with. The select board did. The select board had a meeting back in August to discuss it. I know there are a lot of questions with regards to something like this. What does it look like? What are the impacts? The long-term answer or the big picture is, once it's built, it's much like a solar project. There's a lot of disruption when it's being built, but once it's finished, it's visited on a monthly basis and it's monitored virtually. And you'll see some pictures of what these things look like. I have just a brief excerpt from a National Grid article that they had put out. What is battery storage? Battery storage technologies are essential to speeding up the replacement of fossil fuels with renewable energy. Battery storage systems will play an increasingly pivotal role between green energy supplies and responding to electricity demands. Battery storage or battery energy storage systems are devices that enable energy to be stored and then released when the power is needed. Why is battery storage important and what are its benefits? Battery storage technology has a key part to play in ensuring homes and businesses can be powered by green energy, even when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing. Everyday engineers in the electricity worldwide must match supply with demand. Managing these peaks and valleys becomes more challenging when the target to achieve net zero carbon production. Fossil fuel fired plants have traditionally been used to manage these peaks. We have one right on Depot Street. The plant on Depot Street is a 300 megawatt gas-fired electric plant that was built in 1990. It's called a peaker. It runs sparingly during the year, and it runs in time when they're on standby 24/7, and they get paid by the utility company to be ready to produce energy when there's a peak demand. So it may only be 10 days a year, maybe 100 days a year. I don't think it's anywhere near 100 days, but it runs only when it's called on to run, unlike the plant on Maple Street, which runs fairly continuously. So battery storage essentially is something that has been evolving for a long period of time. It is becoming more prevalent now as the country tries to reduce and the state provides incentives to green energy projects to try and reduce the fossil fuel plants, reduce the need to fire up the peakers, and have projects such as this, which can hold 700 megawatts of electricity and release it without stacks blowing smoke, without the need for gas. They simply take in the energy when demand is low, and they release it when demand is high. As I say, we looked at trying to partner on municipal property because they have a very high value. And when we look at solar projects, there's a good rate of return on what a solar project will provide to municipality. We have one on the landfill, and we have one off of Williams Way. The two combined generate, I think, 10 megawatts of electricity and provide the town with about $500,000 income for the use of those properties. This particular project between Bellingham and Medway is about $500 million project. we've entered into a host community, or we've agreed upon an host community agreement. We haven't signed it yet, but we've come to agreement in principles. All this obviously would have to be approved. First, the article of town meeting, and then the project would be presented to the planning board. It would go through the same planning protocols that any other project would go through. But there are quite a bit of issues addressed in the host community agreement as far as providing for the town for demands on public safety. The chief is here tonight, and he can speak to the aspects of public safety. The project itself will generate just over $4 million a year in tax revenue when it's fully built. To put that in perspective, the two electric plants that we have now don't generate that kind of income. And this is obviously, when you see what battery storage is, they're basically large batteries that are stored in shipping containers. 20-foot shipping containers is what they look like. And the location of the property location that this is proposed to be on is along the high tension lines and gas easement, adjacent to the town of Medway, where the substation is in North Bellingham, and where there's also an electric plant. It's on a parcel of property that is where it would be located is completely cleared. I know a suggestion that it would be significant tree removal impacts from that perspective. That's not the case. So with that said, that's kind of an introduction why the select board has been looking at these initiatives. One, it's green energy. We get credit for green energy projects, but it also provides tremendous financial incentives. Communities are vying for these projects throughout the state. Medway obviously has signed a host community agreement, and I believe it's finished with the planning process. Theirs will be under construction. The benefit of that is our fire chief has been involved with the meetings that they have had with this project, and has become very much up to speed with the technology and understands it quite well. But Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to introduce or have a very, very short slide overview so you can actually see the parcel.
Absolutely.
What the project looks like, and have the developers talk a little bit about it.
Certainly.
I know Ransom's here, and you want to introduce your team here?
Yes, I'm Randy Cook. I'm VP of Development at CME Energy. I'm actually the person that found the project. Can I stand up here? Is pretty
Yeah, wherever you
You
come.
can sit there if you want.
Yeah, sorry.
So
So
I'm never
I-
gonna be presenting, can you come on up here?
Yeah, you presented before to the town.
Yes, yeah, I was here August, yeah. Okay.
Very good presentation, man.
Thank you very much. And then this is my colleague, Mike Holtzman from Peckety Energy and CC. I'm gonna say-
Yes, senior again.
From senior engineer from Peckety. So she can answer a lot more of the technical questions if you have those. I'm kind of like the land guy.
Thank you very much.
No, you can email it to me though, if you'd like.
Or can I just plug in really quickly? Not with a Mac probably.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can, if you want to share via Zoom or,
I can email it.
oh, yeah.
That would be quick.
Yeah,
See, I'm trying to think of how we can,
but you were on.
Thank you.
So just so you know, the reason why we selected this site, so we have a very specific land criteria that we look for when developing these projects. And they are typically in places that already has the existing infrastructure there and are either across the street from or adjacent to an existing substation. So here in Medway, you guys have a very not necessarily in Bellingham, but right where the site is in Medway, they have a very important kind of we're to say like vein of the grid here in New England. Where there is a 345 kilovolt substation and then a 115 kilovolt substation. And so we have secured 83.7 acres of land in that area. That is largely, there will be no, and if you'll see the site, but there's going to be very minimal tree clearing. It's, if you're there today, it's just like a bunch of pretty flat bunch of rocks. And And it'll be happening in 3 phases. So the first phase will be in Medway, which is about a year ahead. The second phase will be happening here in Bellingham, and the third phase will also be happening here in Bellingham. The first phase is 300 megawatts. The second phase is 300 megawatts, and the final phase is 140 megawatts. So we expect to reach commercial operations date, which is the date we actually provide power to the grid, in Q4 of 2028. That's our current timeline. And then I'd love to be able to show you the site, because I think you'll understand that.
Well, I think you have the presentation. I know that they sent it to us earlier today, the latest one.
It might be in, I think it might be in that battery installation video I sent you.
Sent around 2:30 from Eden.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have a PDF. I don't have the. Oh,
But you're
I didn't know
saying
if it was-
Bellingham
Hold on.
is an attractive area for you.
If you got the power.
Yeah,
Based on-
I don't have the PowerPoint,
Yeah.
but I mean, I can.
Based upon the fact that it's right next to the west, the 345 West Medway substation.
Okay,
Yeah, if you go to the
Fourth
fourth slide, you can see where the area is.
So the project site, sits right in between Farm Street and West Street, with access coming from 2 different sections, going from Old Log Road and Stone Street,
okay.
direct access. At the red indicates that's the primary site facility, that's where we're gonna be putting everything up. Right there, it's surrounded by, it's all completely cleared. It's surrounded by boulders and a little pine tree.
And yeah, and pine trees, and then there's a large amount of wetlands on the land up there. So that gives a significant buffer for noise, from anybody. The closest house to us, besides the family that we're buying the land from, is 350 feet.
Have you spoken to them?
We have not spoken to them, but we do plan on doing an open forum with all neighbors in the next, probably before the end of the year,
Okay,
where we can kind of just meet anybody. One of the main things we like to do in working with the communities, we go directly to the community. There are some firms, you may have heard of some of the things that are happening in Medway before we got there, with that's a separate
Yes.
project. Where, we don't like to go to the state, we like to be, very, we like to be good neighbors, so we want to incorporate people's feedback into the design and that sort of thing, so we're happy to do that. We're planning on setting something up in November or December of this year to kind of talk to the neighbors.
thank you. All right, sir.
Cece, do you want to talk a little bit about the batteries themselves?
You jumped us the first line?
Sure.
Second,
Sorry.
sorry.
Yeah.
Like that.
So thank you, Dennis, so much for that introduction. I think you covered that quite nicely.
Very good.
On the right, you see the shipping container, looking like system. That is what the batteries look like. The site will have a multitude of those batteries. The number is still pending, since battery technology is kind of constantly evolving, within safe and practical means. And so kind of density of each battery is increasing over time. So we don't know the exact amount of batteries we'll have on the site at the moment. But the batteries will most likely be lithium-ion phosphate batteries. This is offered by many different vendors. We are currently working with one vendor, CATL, kind of due to their safety record and performance characteristics, but there's many different vendors on the market that kind of comply with these same sort of safety record and performance characteristics. The design will be consistent with Bellingham's noise ordinance. I know noise is always a concern. There will be a sound wall surrounding the site to ensure that noise compliance. Also, as Dennis said, the project is remotely operated and will be visited probably monthly or kind of as things come up.
Or some towns do, want security or something like that on site. That is something we're open to doing, if that's something you guys want.
And that's for various reasons.
But additionally, the power system, the batteries, as well as the power control system will be at grade. And the project will comply with all necessary stormwater requirements, kind of as the project continues in the design process. In addition to the existing vegetation that will be used as screening, any additional vegetation needed outside the sound wall, to screen the project will be
Yeah, so-
evaluated.
Yeah, so we'll have a whole landscaping fund for, make sure that basically you don't see us.
So you don't know, how many batteries yet, but do you know how many containers the site can actually hold on the property? What the
So-
maximum number is?
Yeah, we've done layouts to ensure that we could fit the full size, kind of with current battery sizing accommodations. It's just unknown kind of what the battery landscape will look like in 2 to 3 years, kind of when this project is being built. So we can't say for certain how many batteries, but we know the project will fit.
Well, I
Can I
guess,
just interrupt for 1 second? Can I go back to something you said at your last meeting? The technology is changing. So these units, in essence, potentially getting smaller.
Yeah, the density is getting much smaller, so.
Okay.
So-
Yeah.
Seeing
So
how we're
the-
going down that path,
She'll
I'll throw a
use them to
question
answer that.
on that.
I just want to say, the shipping container, the sizes of the units will stay the same. It's just a standard shipping container, but there will be more megawatt hours per container.
That you can fit into the.
Yeah, so there's,
how many shipping containers can fit on the site that you're looking at? That's what I'm.
So yeah, I think on our last meeting, we shared a preliminary layout, which we can send to you. I don't remember the exact number of shipping containers, for this exact project. Do you have it?
yeah, it's roughly 1,000 containers at the end of life, which kind of incorporates any sort of augmentation that is needed. Everyone that kind of knows that batteries don't necessarily keep their whole lifespan. Everyone sees their phones and knows you can charge them more.
That's where I was gonna go down.
So,
Add a question onto that. So the life expectancy of these containers, you know, we're not, this is a zoning exercise we're looking at tonight, but as part of that, once this is deployed and you're on the grid, your other projects, are you upgrading the batteries?
So we would
After
switch them
somebody-
out. So we would actually have containers that are on site to switch out.
To switch out?
Once, so typically the lifespan of a battery is around 20 years. So, and that will, you know, batteries, just like your phone, you know, they'll what's the word I'm looking for?
Upgrade.
Yeah, and so we will switch those out probably within a, you know, some time in that 20-year time frame.
So I guess what I'm at, where I was going with the question is that other projects with construction sites that we have, there's a construction phase.
Mhm.
And that construction phase is, you know, can be up to a year. Or a certain time, and I'm not judging your construction time,
Mhm.
but the question I have is there going to be another construction phase 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years?
No, that would happen when?
20 years?
Yeah, about 20 years, what
Okay.
do you think, 10 years? 10
it
years?
depends on kind of what is chosen for the specific system. Augmentation, I think that might have been the word you were looking
Yeah,
for earlier, is a flexible kind of method. So it's something that is not necessarily determined at this phase. It's what is best in the future.
And there would be no
But-
construction, we'd just be taking a battery, putting it on a truck, moving it out, and then taking another battery and putting it in its place.
Yeah, I guess that was my question. How often are we, I mean, is this a continual traffic?
No.
No, it's maybe after 10 years or after 5 years that you would need to come in and do the operation.
Move
Oh,
1,000 of these things?
Not
So
a
you wouldn't
thousand.
move out 1,000 at
no.
a time, that's not.
Okay.
That's,
I
Yeah,
guess I'm
there
trying
would
to get the
be-
scope.
Roughly 6 to 8 months of construction initially, with augmentation phases occurring in 7 years and then in 12 years.
Thank you.
In terms of like the overall kind of land disturbance, construction, kind of like those things that usually occur, that would be happening initially. At those augmentation phases, the pads would be ready for those additional units, so it would only be a matter of truck traffic, not necessarily all of the intensity of a full construction.
I apologize for interrupting.
That's okay. A couple more things, and I know this is zoning, but I'm curious, what kind of noise do these containers give off once they're up and running? Do you have a decibel? I'm just curious, because if you're gonna have a lot of these containers, and I know there's gonna be, noise mitigation.
So the noise comes from fans, kind of on each unit. It's also hard to say an exact decibel amount because it changes between different battery manufacturers. The way they do cooling on their systems is a little bit different manufacturer to manufacturer. So that's why it's hard to give an exact answer, but we will be doing noise modeling, with a certain manufacturer to ensure that we will be compliance with Bellingham's noise ordinance. And that's where something like the sound wall would also come into play to kind of insulate the noise to inside of the project.
So it's sort of similar to like the humming you would hear like at the back of a mall, that's probably similar to what you're thinking. So it's based, the sound comes from keeping the batteries cool, sort of like an HVAC system.
It's a fan essentially, so it's the same sort of system.
And my last request is, a lot of what I've heard recently from folks in town, and maybe you don't have to spend a lot of time on it, is a safety concern. What kind of things could possibly go wrong, and what do you have in place to address them? Because
The fire chief is here, and I know he wanted to address the safety issues, certainly the developer can, but I know the chief has spent an awful lot of time
Yeah.
reviewing the Medway project and obviously paying attention to the industry.
So Steve, I'll direct my answer right to you. So this is probably one of the most governed safety aspects that we have seen recently in the fire service. This is governed by NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association Code 855. That's the regulation for these types of systems. This type of system we as the AHJ authority having jurisdiction have a lot of oversight and a lot of say of what we want for protection. Minimum protections out of the gate. Monitored fire alarm systems, 24/7, 365, have to be. Monitored suppression systems, all built within these containers, have to be. Training, constant training for us as firefighters and how we're going to approach and do this. I have not seen a standard that is governing as well as the 855 standard for this type of project. I'm saying here and I'm standing here in front of you, telling you that this is a safe project because of what is built into it. And this is because of an incident happened in 2017 in Surprise, Arizona, where 4 firefighters were injured. They weren't killed, they were injured because of education and lack of education, lack of safety features that were built into these units. Since then, the 855 standard has come out. And now it governs it very tightly. Just like if you put one of these in your home. Anybody have a battery storage system in your home? No.
You have an electric vehicle?
Anybody have a Tesla? Right, let me give you a good example. Just say you have a Tesla, okay? And you run your Tesla, and what happens when the little leaves go down? What do you need to do? Charge it. So when you stop your Tesla and you plug it in, what does it essentially become? A battery storage system.
Yeah.
All right, just hear me out for a second. It essentially is a battery storage system. You're storing energy in your batteries until when? Steve wants to take his family out for a ride in his Tesla, okay? In your truck, right, I know you have a truck, but I'm just saying, so the Tesla at that point becomes a storage system. Where do you park your Tesla? Where do you charge your Tesla? In your garage? Okay, now, I can't enforce you to put a fire suppression system in your garage. There are codes that will govern it. So I'm gonna ask this question on a Tesla. Is there a fire alarm system on your Tesla? Or any electric vehicle that's out there today? There's not. Is there early warning devices on your electric vehicles? A Tesla. They're making electric fire trucks right now and they don't have emergency warning devices on them for if a battery fails. This system does. We will be notified immediately, and it's not something you go open up the door and you go charging into. You work with the specialty company, pack it up. Their representatives will be there for us, we mitigate it together. I'm telling you, since 2017, when these started coming to light, there's one incident, that's it.
So Chief, it's remote monitoring then?
Remote monitoring, Steve, exactly. I don't know where it is, and I don't wanna know where it is. I'm gonna be honest with you, my previous job, we did have a situation with a smaller unit like this at one of the schools. We get on the phone and we walk through it. And they're like, this is what you need to do, this is what you will not do, we will be there within 35 minutes, and they were, and they walked us through what we needed to do. Bill?
Chief, you'll be provided any extra safety equipment
Yes,
in addition to education
training,
that you need from these people,
correct.
not from the town.
Yeah, no, nope.
That's
not
all
from
part of
town.
the
All-
host community agreement.
Yeah, it's all part of the host agreement, that the training, equipment, anything we need special for this project comes from that, comes to us at no cost to the residents.
And I realize safety is huge on everyone's.
Number one.
Yep.
We have an acronym called LIPS. First L is life safety, both for us and the residents.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it toxic if it does catch fire?
Sure.
Is that covered under that rule that you just talked about?
Absolutely. I want you to think about this. Do you have a nice sofa in your house?
Do I what?
Do you have a nice sofa?
Yeah.
Okay, you know what that sofa is made out of?
Formaldehyde.
Calcium products. You get so many BTUs off of that one sofa burning, and there's just as many chemicals coming off of that sofa in a normal house fire than if we had battery meltdown.
Right,
That's
but you're
being
talking,
contained.
how many of these units? I mean.
It doesn't matter.
I'm talking about one
Hold
unit.
on, hold on, because it does matter, because what do you have all these furnishings in your home? You're not gonna have 1,000 containers burning at one time if something, God forbid, happens. It's going to be isolated to one unit if something happens. This is what I'm trying to say to you, so you have to look at it, so yes, it does matter,
That's not what I said.
oh, I'm sorry, because of what you have in your home.
Sorry, we actually misspoke earlier. I just was talking to one of the engineers. So it's not 1,000 containers, it'll be 592
Within
containers.
That's-
Bellingham.
I was speaking, sorry, I was gonna say something as well. That's for the whole
Yeah.
project, not for just what is in there.
Chief, can I ask you a question?
Please,
You mentioned the furniture.
Yep.
Houses don't have, fire suppression systems inside them.
some do, some don't,
These will have fire suppression,
these are fire suppression systems, correct? Yes.
and that's chemical based.
Yes. And this is all subject to third-party review by fire protection engineers that will guide us on the standard of 855 and any updates that came in of what has to be put in. I don't mean this harshly to the project people. It's not what they want to put in. It's what we as AHJ with the fire protection engineer upon the 855 standard at the current time, that's what we'll go into for fire protection
So
systems.
in essence, you'll be using that third party. Like we would do a peer review.
Exactly right,
Okay,
correct. Yes,
paid for by.
paid for by them,
Supposed applicant.
yes.
I'm just supposed.
There's a lot,
right.
it's really, folks, what I'm saying is there's a lot of things that we just built into it.
Can I just ask a quick question? So Chief, if the code changes,
Mhm.
that would trigger
An upgrade in the
an
system.
upgrade for you
Yes,
to
ma'am.
review and go over the code
That
changes?
is correct.
How often does the code
Every
change?
5 years.
Okay.
So the current code is now is a 2023, which is the latest updated code. It just changed. So we're good till 2028.
When this is delivering?
Correct.
Okay.
And that was
Got it.
rather substantial in 23, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
And again, it all came light from 2017.
Yep.
Not going too detailed in the fire protection, but you got a suppression system that goes off, and I imagine Medway's already ahead of this, and you've already been in those conversations. Is it like a gas that comes down on it, or
There's two systems, sprinkler, which is a wet system,
Wet
because it has to
system.
be water to the product.
on a battery?
Yes.
Okay.
So if your Tesla burns, Phil, how do we put it out?
They don't, they burn for hours.
But how do we cool the cells to stop them from interacting? We add water. So don't say that they don't go out, because
Well,
they will eventually go out.
You're
Yes.
the expert.
He's
but-
the expert. Let's
But
go with
they
it.
do burn for hours.
He's the expert.
Yep.
Very different.
Yep.
What's the other, you said there was.
There's a, and I apologize, I don't remember the name of the chemical that it
The
is.
chemical
It's
base?
called a clean agent chemical. These folks might know what it is, off the top of my head, I'm not sure what it is, but it's clean agent or sprinkler systems, one or the other.
Are fires a common occurrence? There's a lot of talk
No.
about fire.
No. Do you know there's more fires in residential battery storage systems? Up to date, there's been 141 across globally. 60 of them are all in residential homes. Serious fires. There's more fires happening because of batteries and Teslas, power packs. I'm not picking on Tesla, I'm just using that as an example.
E-bikes,
I'm sorry,
e-bikes.
e-bikes is outrageous in Boston and in New York right now. There's more in the residential setting than there is in the commercial setting. Good question.
Are the batteries, depleted batteries, are they falling a hazardous material category?
I can't answer that. I have to look at the experts on
So
that.
there are a number of facilities that are used to recycle the batteries. And then, they can actually be repurposed for other, like, you know, your lawnmower or your, you know, tools or smaller batteries. There's one of the facilities is in New York and there's one in Andover. It's called 4K or something.
So they can be repurposed?
Yes, they can be
They're not
repurposed.
disposed
They can
of?
have a second life, yes.
So they could maybe purpose.
Sorry.
I have a frivolous question and I have I think a good question. So the good question would be, is there mitigation for leakage? And batteries have been known to leak, that they've.
The container itself.
Right, like, so is there a mitigation on that for leakage, basically, like any sort of chemical leakage into the ground, containment, that sort of thing? I'm assuming that there's a low probability of that happening, considering that it's highly monitored and that things are swapped out pretty consistently. But there's always that one-off kind of situation, and, you know, from an environmental point of view, I would just hate for there to be just a, you know, negative impact. And then I'll ask my other frivolous question, and then you can probably answer both. So here's the frivolous question. What color are these containers? Are they white?
I guess I could take both of those questions. They
They
will likely be white, but it's probably whatever is easiest for the system. So likely white. And then in terms of leaking, yes, it will be monitored. And if anything kind of were to be leaking, I'm sure that's something the system would very quickly before it got to the soil. But God forbid anything would happen, there would be some sort of soil maintenance or environmental management plan. But that is if that were to happen. And they're not liquid type batteries. And so leakage is not like a material risk on the system. They look more, if you see a data center, the inside of these containers look more of like what you would see in a data center versus a lot of like liquid cooled, or a lot of like liquid.
Are they
So
steel?
steel, the containers, not sure.
The containers,
Can I just ask for a moment? We've got a little bit on our hand here. When you ask a question, can you please state your name and address? I think we gotta wait from that for a couple of moments, just so it can be recorded by the secretary. I apologize. The person who asked the question,
I just have a couple questions, since I asked, are they, Bryan Hall, 34 High Street, are they steel?
Yes,
Yes.
They are, and they must be coated with something so they don't rust. I mean,
Likely galvanized, just to limit rust.
what's
Galvanization.
What's the life on the container?
Steel is normally very long lasting, typically,
Well, to keep it, you know, watertight.
yeah, it would typically last at least 50 years. That's the typical kind of material properties of steel. And in terms of like water tightness, these are rated for outdoor use.
So you're not really replacing the containers as often as you're replacing the
yeah,
batteries.
you're just taking the battery.
Right.
The augmentation protocol is dependent on the manufacturer, so either the batteries can be replaced or the container can be replaced.
So this question is kind of for the board and for you folks. Where's the closest light facility that's operational now to us? And have you folks on the board spoken to anyone that the surrounding town or the population of that community to get their feedback on how they are as neighbors and as an entity in their space?
you let us know. Because
Well, you
this
must
point,
know. Where's
this is
the
our
closest
first,
one?
this is our first public meeting.
Well, okay, so where's the closest facility that's
When we
operational?
find out,
to us?
I'm waiting to find out.
No, I'm asking you
The
guys.
battery
where is it?
system?
Yeah,
I think Dennis mentioned that there is a battery system in town connected to one of the community solar sites.
Yeah, it's one of the solar sites. It's very small. You know, it's maybe 1 meg or something like
Yeah,
that. It's a
community
6
solar.
megawatt solar field. I don't know.
You guys have these all over the country, correct? You have a
Is there
bunch.
another farm that you have similar to what you're building? It's already up?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Where is it? Where's the big, where's one that's relatively close to what you're asking to build here?
Right.
Where's the closest one to us?
There's a lot, so.
So
It doesn't have to be
apologies,
in
I'm
the
not able
state.
to
It
answer it
could be-
quickly. Our developer who manages the East Coast
Mhm.
had a family emergency, he's not here tonight. But we have facilities all over the country. I personally have my projects in New Mexico, California, Washington State, Indiana, and these facilities are there as well. A final product of them, we could absolutely get you photos of what that would look like.
Yeah. We have,
Yeah,
But
I
not-
think for the board and us, we'd like to see something similar that's operational. And I think the board should probably do some due diligence and reach out to the towns or people, whoever your counterparts are in those communities and find out how's it going? You know, get feedback from people that are living with it or around it. It may be great. I'm not for or against it. I'm here like most people. I'm curious about it. It sounds safe. I believe you. It does sound safe. But it's a big facility, 1,000 units. Batteries are toxic, you know. Part of me is like, oh, I don't want this thing, but, you know. And Dennis, it's supposed to give the town what, $4.5 million a year, 20 years, something like that?
Correct. 30.
So it's a lot of money. And I get it. So, but I'm more interested to know, I mean, I suspect you'll get this information back to the board. I want to know something that's of like size, that's operational now, that you can give us some metrics on, and maybe the board can reach out to them and say, how's it going?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're happy to do that. We're very into, meeting with you all. So tonight, we're not really looking to get this approved.
No, I know what we're here for, but
Go ahead.
So looking at the presentation, watching the video of it, it doesn't sound like there's any of these in Massachusetts that have been completed. Is that correct?
So
There's 6 towns that are rolling.
There's a
this
number of them that have been completed, but not at this scale. So the closest ones, there's one in construction currently right now across the street from our facility in Medway.
But that is just starting, right?
Yes,
It's not-
it's under construction.
I think
right.
we want to see one that's completed and operational
Yeah,
and kind of
Yeah,
get that
that-
feedback. I don't think there's any in Massachusetts right now that are.
right. There's
So that there's not.
well, there are battery energy storage facilities in Massachusetts, just not at this scale.
Right.
so you see our point. We'd like to know, we'd like to hear how this thing operates and, is it a good neighbor, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Type
of course,
thing.
yeah, absolutely.
So if this comes to fruition,
Can we just, hold 1 second, please? Dennis?
I was gonna say, the selectmen had a similar conversation with Aiden when he was here, the gentleman that they were referring to who's not here tonight. Asked the same question, and he was able to give a fair number of sites in New England, but you're right. Projects of this size in Massachusetts, they're just now coming on. California has lots of them.
Yeah, so we have 2 in Texas and 2 in California. You can just let us know that we can put you in touch with them.
Speaking of California, there was just a large fire at the beginning of September, one of those facilities.
Yeah, I don't know if that's not our battery, so.
I bet it was a similar facility though, so it's, that was a month ago.
Okay, so yeah, I don't know who built that, but that's not.
Ma'am, can we please catch you?
Yeah, my name's Peggy McBride.
When are you putting this on the town meeting warrant
It's on the town meeting
Town meeting.
for the next, what is that?
for November, third Wednesday in November, whatever that is.
November
Not
20th.
election, later in the month in November.
It's November 20th.
Yes. And they will make a presentation, November 20th, and I'm sure they'll have answers, and not personnel there, to answer the questions of the audience. This is a process that we're just trying to move it forward based on the board's opinion and getting input from you. It's not like we are making a decision this evening. All this allows us to do is move it forward for the town meeting. And just one, Sylvester, hold on, we didn't get the full questions from the board. So do you have any other questions?
Yeah, actually, could we pull
And I want to
back,
get back.
could we pull back up the map?
I'm sorry.
And
Stephen.
so I'm familiar with where the other facility, when you drive down 126 is. Could you show me on here where, when I drive down 126, I can see the existing power facility
I'm gonna,
compared to your red?
I can show you. Yeah.
I'm gonna pull up Mass Mapper.
Yeah, it just, I mean, we're putting in a zoning overlay district here, and I just want to see how, I assume it's right next to it, but I couldn't tell in that drawing.
Yeah.
Wait 1 second. I think this is gonna be a little bit better, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So.
So this would be Hartford Avenue.
So yeah, so the Medway project
Yeah,
that we're doing is gonna be going in here.
well, it's the existing site that's now there,
Yeah.
where is that in
So
relation?
the
to
first
your-
300 megawatts are gonna be in this area
Okay,
up here, that's in Medway. And this is the town line.
yeah,
And the 440 megawatts are gonna be in this area.
All the dirt area?
That red area.
they're right here.
Right in this here.
Rob, do we know where,
And
if
so-
I drive down Hartford Avenue, where's the power station that I see going on? Do you know
This
where?
is the Exelon power station here.
Up here,
Yeah,
that's it here.
That's it. And this
Okay.
is the substation and there's another,
So it's
that's a
before that.
345 kV substation, that's a 115.
Okay,
And so we have rezoned this parcel, like basically all of this. The energy research district is right next to the
Right next.
station. And so that's what we'll be doing here.
So we're connected.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you. And the idea is that you would not see this from
Thank you for
the
coming.
road at all. And when we get into the permitting, with all those discussions about, you know, making sure that it's not seen and all that stuff would come up at that point, but your intention is that it's not gonna be then I'll use a bad word, an eyesore for the community.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Thank you, that's my question.
That's why we targeted that area, but yes,
Just want to make sure.
of course.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sort of on a larger scale, there was a project proposed in the western part of the state that was recently, the developer pulled out because of significant community resistance to the proposal. That was in August. I see the benefits of the $4 million annually, once it's up and running, so that won't be right away, I assume, and I don't know if that's 4 million based on performance, or if that's just in taxes, whatever it is, but there's a buy-in that the developer is willing to pay to settle this proposal in Bellingham. If it is such a desirable thing for a community, why is there the buy-in?
It's not a buy-in, it's based on the value of the project. You can't just come up willy-nilly with a number, much like the power plant on Maple Street or Depot Street. You have to come up with a value. The value that we come up with is $9,300 per megawatt. It's a 440 megawatt facility. So it's based on something that's very, clear and tangible. You can't just come up with a number and.
I get it. There's a
Yeah,
nexus.
so it's based on the value. The project, as they said, is estimated at just over $500 million, the entire Midway Bellingham project. So you can easily come out with values based on that, based on the per megawatt. So that's where the number came from.
That's very transparent.
It's the same number that Medway's using. They use this, we use similar formula, much like when, the two electric plants were being built by the same developer in Bellingham and in Blackstone. We were in constant communication on values, and it's not easy to come up with, you don't usually have big projects like that. Our local assessor can't handle that, so you have to get some professional assistance outside of your local assessors to come up with those types of values. But that's where that number comes from. It's not a buy-in or anything like that.
But
Yeah.
it's more than just.
Based on the
I get
value,
it. It's kind of.
It's based on the value of the batteries.
Right, but then that value is subject to negotiation, but there's a premium. It's just, you want to locate here in Bellingham, there's a premium, negotiated a premium to settle in this particular location. Why is there a premium? Let's call it a premium. To,
Because Dennis is good at negotiating.
but why, but if this is such a great thing,
Yeah,
why is there? a premium?
I don't know what, when you're saying premium, like, I don't know what you mean by that. There's no premium.
Can I just,
Desired
maybe
spot,
infer,
maybe?
it's-
But, yeah.
I think the value
Yeah,
to you is the proximity to Medway and Bellingham, to high tension lines and Medway. It's
Yes, you
simply
could say
based on
that,
the
yeah.
value of the land in proximity to what's surrounding it,
Said, when you started.
correct?
so yeah, you could say that. I mean, honestly, I mean, we, in some communities, we have, the substation that we're connecting to is just as desirable as here.
Mhm.
And Dennis, quite frankly, and his team have done a great job at extracting the value out of us. We were paying less in some of those places. So that's what happened here.
So we've raised the bar.
I would say, yeah, that's true, yes.
but I think it's based on, fairness
Yeah.
and value.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
Which is
proximity.
which is what we do with any development in town, as you know. Bellingham has zoned certain areas for industrial development, and some of those properties generate traffic. There's a cost associated, with them coming into town from a tax revenue perspective. The only reason that residents, voted industrial corridors is to try and minimize the impact and make the community as affordable as possible. That's part of it. And, should it be the sole consideration? Of course not, but, over time, certain areas were zoned industrially. And that industry comes in, we better get our fair share, and the assessors better get every nickel that we have coming to us, because we're living here with the impacts. I don't think this particular project has impacts.
Mhm.
Doesn't have trucks, doesn't have traffic, doesn't have noise, doesn't have smokestack, so, yeah.
No kidding.
We've been trying, I mean, we put an RFP out in, I think, 2019, trying to get a project like this. The technology wasn't as far along to put it on that Williams Way site, which is now a solar site, because we knew it was much more advantageous as battery storage than it would be as solar, but, it was too far from a substation. It didn't make sense for the developers, and it didn't happen. Pearl Street, we actually approved the site on Pearl Street, but again, it just didn't make sense. We walked away from that project, but, here we are with a project that I think is well buffered. I think it's important to show that map, because it shows the parcels, and then it shows where the project's going. The project itself is on cleared land, and it's quite a distance from the nearest, residence. The closest one, obviously, is the one that's sold, or the property's under agreement, but at some distance, it's buffered nicely. And to do it this way, to have an opportunity to look at the impacts, to see what we can agree to as far as, support from the developers for public safety. You haven't seen the host community agreement, but it does address a lot of issues. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Brian, anything else?
Just a curiosity question, is the fans that are operated on each of these storage bins, are they powered by the batteries, or is the electricity coming in through another way?
I think it depends on the system. Usually there is like some sort of auxiliary load, that is on the batteries. It's kind of, I think it's powered by the batteries. It's not a huge load in comparison to the size of the batteries. So I will likely say that it's powered by the batteries, but it's dependent on each system.
And just in terms of degree and scale, the chief references the Tesla battery. What is the difference in terms of magnitude between a Tesla battery and the battery in one of these storage facilities?
So for the specific Tesla battery, I'm not sure of the exact kind of size of it, but I'm assuming it's anywhere between 100 to 500 kilowatt hours. while in concert, these batteries are anywhere between 4 to 5.5 megawatt hours. So about 10 times the size, I would say, but that's dependent on the Tesla battery. I don't know the specific specification off the top of my head, but these batteries are much larger than the Tesla batteries.
Just have a few questions. I understand that they're Hecate Energy's batteries. Once they're operational, is it Hecate Energy that's overseeing and monitoring the batteries? Is it the same company that's responding if there's ever an incident and if a technician needs to respond? Is it Hecate Energy that's coming out?
So we use a third-party company to monitor our facilities. We are not coming out on site. We are not the experts at that type of stuff. We're the experts at developing these projects. We always pick the right people for the right job. As like I'm sure you do with your consultants, we pick consultants too because they can handle that better. And a third-party company will be able to handle that without any bias or what have you.
Yeah, and that they will be monitored 24/7, kind of with someone called to ensure, and there's organizations that do that type of thing.
And then as far as noise goes, you mentioned that the fans are utilized for cooling. Does that mean increased noise during the summer months? Is it kind of cranked up to keep the batteries cool?
It could be, but I believe that the noise modeling is done on a worst kind of case scenario. And so we would be modeling that noise wall, the sound wall to kind of insulate the batteries at a worst case scenario. So even in the summer months, it should be insulated.
And then my last question, the nearest abutter, how far away?
350 feet.
350 feet?
Yeah.
This would be probably a question for the fire chief, but if worst case scenario, if there was ever an incident, is that a safety concern for the nearest abutters?
No.
No, there's no health concern or anything? I think you have to step out for a minute, but I
If there
just
were,
stated the question, so it can be answered.
it should not be a concern. If there were to be a fire, it would be insulated to a single container. The containers are spaced in a way that fire does not jump from one container to the next. And so a blaze where there's multiple containers on fire would not occur.
I just had a question to go on next comment.
Sure.
Is it 350 feet from the property line or from the project
I
itself?
believe it's 350 feet from the sound wall.
Saw wall. Thank you.
And you would assume containers would be pretty close to the sound wall, right?
Fairly, but
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm just kind of thinking from the exact project line, so
Nick,
maybe
it's
a little bit
just-
further from the back.
Nick, what can I answer for you?
Chief, quick question. I mentioned, the nearest abutter is about a little over 300 feet. Worst case scenario, if there was an incident in any of these containers, is that a safety concern for the nearest abutters?
I'm gonna give you my honest answer. I can't answer that
Okay.
because there's environmental factors that we can't control.
Okay,
Time of day. Weather is the biggest one that we cannot control. Is it warm? Is it sunny? Is there a wind? Is there no wind? Is it a damp, humid day? Is it drizzling out? Is it foggy? These are all things we can't. Now, what I can answer for you, Nick, is what part of our regional emergency planning committee, Bellingham is, and the fire department is as well. And we're part of new software. So we're gonna be able to map this out. God forbid you have a hazmat spill or anything happens.
Sure.
It's called Marplot. We're going to be trained in it, in about 3 weeks, and we'll have access to it, that we can map it out and see where we go from there.
So like a tabletop.
You got it? Yeah,
thank you.
you're welcome.
I just have, I think, one question. Outside of proximity to being located near a substation, what other factors come into play when you're looking at potential sites?
Industrial land, that has hopefully it has existing energy infrastructure. And then, I know that's probably the biggest, and then, actual acreage. You can't build this on like an acre of land, right? So you need enough land. So typically it's industrial land. We don't want to be in a place that you have to cut down a lot of trees. Kind of renewable energy developers are kind of going against what we're supposed to be trying to do here. But yeah, I'd say it's industrial land.
And as well as, like being relatively flat and already
Yeah, that's
cleared,
fine.
that makes it a lot easier for us to
Topography,
build a
yeah.
project. Topography is a big.
Right. And are you finding that municipalities in our state are behind in terms of their zoning? Where you're needing to come like here and propose overlays because we don't have as many facilities and we're not up to,
Specifically for batteries, you're asking.
yes.
That's a good question. I would say, so we have, a number of these other projects in the state. Some towns already have, you know, if it's industrial zone, they have instances here, but I would say that. I don't know if behind is the word I would use, it's just like, needs to be a little more education. It is a new technology, so with
That's the
anything,
biggest thing.
there's like, you know, there's just not as, so we typically will have to come up with like a use or some sort of, you know, but we like doing that. We like to work, you know, we'd rather work with the community. So, and, you know, I wish Abe was here, but his whole career has been working on zoning batteries and things like that, so. So I guess I would say yes and no. But
Thank you.
Two very quick things. Is this the largest project, if it comes to fruition, that you've done so far?
No,
for you guys?
no.
Okay, and then my second, and I'm just out of curiosity, I mean, 350 feet sounds pretty close to me. Does that sound wall, will that eliminate a low-level hum that these people could potentially hear into perpetuity?
From my understanding, we would be compliant with all the sound levels. and
Well,
noises.
let me just say this, I know there's a decibel limit, which I'm sure you'll fall well within guidelines. But then, you know, like me, I live, you know, near a couple warehouses, I hear, you know, I can hear, you know, what's going on. If you have 500 containers with 2 ACs on the top, you know, potentially you're talking about a low-level hum that never goes away. I'm just curious.
I mean, it is temperature dependent, so summer versus winter, I'm sure will have very different noise considerations, but I mean, living next to a highway, kind of, you have a similar kind of scenario, so I think we will try our best. We will be complying with that.
We will do our very best efforts to make sure that the noise is at the lowest possible level it can be.
I think that's.
I want to pick up on that for me. Dennis, technically, is this on Farm Street?
Well, it's not on any street, really.
Okay.
It's a piece of property in the woods. I mean, the access from Stone Street, from
Okay.
the backside of Stone Street,
All right.
actually almost going into Medway. But what I was gonna say is, keep in mind that this project will be coming before the board. And I'm sure that one of the things you'll do is get a peer review on sound to
Yes.
make sure that it's mitigated to the absolute fullest extent they can.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't know all the details, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that from a decibel standpoint,
sure,
it's gonna fall well within.
yeah.
It's just, but from a reality standpoint, if you're sitting out your backyard and you hear the hum all the time, the decibel limit may fall within, you know, guidelines, but the annoyance of a low-level hum, you know, round the clock.
And that's why I
Might
said
be
one
an
of the
issue.
things that you would do when this comes before you was get a peer review
Yeah.
for sound to make sure that doesn't happen or is
Yeah.
mitigated to the, you know, and
It's a
one of the
good
nice
point.
things too, obviously, it's surrounded by, this site is surrounded by fairly thick, heavy, forests, you know, or trees. Landscape.
Couple, yes, you want,
Yeah, I guess now would be a good time if the board wants, I can just quickly go over the language of this actual overlay that was drafted, which is really what we're meeting for
Correct.
tonight, so I can pull it up here, actually. Now, you know what I mean. But basically, the way that this is written in the multiple sections, there's the 2 parcels that are included in the overlay. They are zoned agricultural, which the underlying zoning will still remain. This is the overlay to go on top. And the overlay itself will only allow for the battery energy storage system facility. However, you can still utilize the land per the agricultural zoning like any overlay. And that's how this is written. Additionally, for the allowed use, which would be the battery energy storage system facility, there's 2 procedures that the applicant would have to go through the planning board. One is special permit, the other one is the development plan approval. So with the special permit, it will be based upon the considerations of our typical article for special permit. But there's also some additional criteria that is written in this article. The biggest item, the absolute most critical item that's written in here is for the emergency services, which states that the owner and operator of the facility needs to cooperate with the local emergency services in developing their response plan, but also providing their summaries, their schematics, the site plan. They need the buy-in and approval of public safety in order to get the approval. That's part of the special permit criteria for this. There's also regulations regarding lighting. They need to be dark sky compliant. There's no allowed spill off to adjoining parcels, which that is in our regulations already. This is kind of redundant, but redundancy is okay in this case. There's regulations regarding signage. There can't be advertisements. There needs to be a sign that identifies the owner, provides 24-hour emergency contact phone number, and then of course warn of any dangers like any industrial site. Any accessory structures need to follow the regulations of the underlying zoning. So basically, there can't be any structures that are right on the property line. There are setback requirements. And then there is also regulations in here regarding clearing and soil erosion, which is also falls into the development plan approval and special permit categories. So once again, some redundancy. The other item in here, well, actually two other items. There's also a monitoring and maintenance plan, which also needs to be acceptable to the fire chief and emergency medical services. And the other item, which actually I think we discussed very briefly previously, was financial surety for the decommissioning, which is something that I know we have required this for the solar voltaic overlay. And this is another situation where it would be required as well for this. So that's the overview of what has been drafted.
Before I make my comments, I think there's one last question. I apologize for the incident.
No, it's okay. I need the exercise. Gene Cates, 300 Farm Street. We are abutters to the property and the tree line there, you can see right onto the property the way it exists now. You did mention topology, and I was a little concerned about that. I understand that it's in a relatively flat area. However, the southern end of that parcel where it comes close to our property is a hill. And the hill, there is groundwater off the hill and it flows across the two properties into a tributary that goes into Stallbrook. So I'm very concerned about any chemical leakage possibly from any of the
Shipping
containers, thank you. And in the, from not just the batteries themselves, but from the fire suppression system. And you said the cooling is all air cooling, there's no liquid cooling?
It is manufacturer dependent, so that'll be a part of the final vendor.
So that would be more
process.
chemicals as well. So one of the things we might want to understand when we get to the town meeting is what is the, any possible ground leakage for any chemicals that are involved in the system over time as well.
It's great. That's really good feedback. So I would just also like to say, we're still like in the design phase of this, so the clay is still wet on this.
Yeah.
So this feedback is really good for us, so that we can incorporate it into the design and alleviate your concerns.
Yes.
So,
And I know we discussed already finding another property that's equivalent megawatts. In addition to photos, if there's a possibility of visiting it. I'm open to traveling anywhere on continental US to check it out. So I truly understand what the noise issues are, what the lighting issues are, and, what possibly the property value, to a budding property, any impact to that as well, so.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Based on the questions that we had, can I ask two questions? These are more to Rob. I'm assuming this is not in the water resource district up there?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then the support that the fire department would need, that's in the host agreement, I would assume?
Correct.
Okay,
Well, that
it's,
is.
it's clear,
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
clearly defined
I
and
think the chief is quite pleased.
you're happy with that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Those were my two quick ones.
I want to back to my comments, but I saw some more hands raised. Who had their hands raised? Okay, woman in the back, the far back.
I'm Megan, also from Farm Street, and I share a lot of concerns with my neighbor here, especially regarding the property value. That's a good point.
Okay,
But I wondered, you mentioned Stone Street and Old Log Lane, which are both dead ends with forests between the area you're proposing and those streets. So you would clear that, I'm assuming, to continue those roads, or how would you propose getting into the site?
So there's already access through those dead ends. Those have already been cleared. Through Old Log Road, Stone Street, it looks like an ATV did that, but through Old Log, it's like a legitimate road.
And we
yeah, so
probably
we're gonna
repave
bring
it
all that equipment and construction and all those batteries down Old Log Lane.
Can,
For a very short period of time, yeah.
Chief,
I thought it was my understanding that everything was gonna come in through the Midway side for the construction project, nothing was going in through Stone Street or Old Log
And
Lane.
if that is the case, then that's the route they'll take.
That was-
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Oh,
access is through Midway.
Yeah,
That's the
all
first
construction
phase,
through
so that would
Midway,
make sense.
yeah.
But I'm thinking about maybe, through fire safety, there are multiple entry points to get to that site.
yeah,
if
I was
need be.
more wondering where the project was gonna be done from.
First, yeah,
Access.
phase one is gonna be done on the Medway side, so that would be on Stone.
Phase two, the one further up near Farm Street.
Phase 2 and 3 are Bellingham.
But
but
access will
you're
still be
but-
utilized
It'll
through.
be, it's
It
almost
will
like
most
one
likely, yeah,
project.
because it's all built already.
Yeah.
From that side over.
Okay, so they're not gonna go through the
Yeah.
little side streets up here.
No, if we're gonna go, we're gonna utilize one access point. Just to bring up all these trucks and equipment, but. Yeah,
And sir, as we go through the permitting process, we look at emergency access and reducing access to those means.
And just to touch back again,
Certainly.
I know we've talked about sound in our plan, but I don't feel like you guys have given a really concrete answer. So, in terms of the sound barrier that you're putting up, is that intended to contain all of the sound or just contain enough of the sound to get you below what our threshold is? To
Sound,
be
mo-
compliant.
yeah, sound modeling will be done to be compliant. I think it's hard to kind of,
Compliant.
with Bellingham noise.
With our noise
Yeah.
ordinance.
What we will do as a rule, and Rob, correct me, we look at worst case scenarios when projects come in front of us. We use an outside, third party peer reviewer who works for us, but is paid for by the applicant. Rob, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't have the exact decibels in front of me because I don't have it memorized, but there are decibel limits that are allowed through the Bellingham zoning bylaws. One item two is that this is considered Farm Street, even though there is no access on Farm Street, but Farm Street is considered a scenic road, which has even lower decibel limits too. So it's not a question of if, they're going to meet the criteria, they're going to have to meet the criteria.
No, I understand that. I
So,
guess I was just
and-
curious if the criteria was no sound or just being below the threshold. Because to the other gentleman's point, even if it's a quiet hum that we're just hearing all the time at our house, it's a beautiful area. It's a scenic road, as you mentioned, so it's,
So, yeah, we totally understand that. I'm sorry, we can't give you a better answer. One of the main reasons for that is we haven't gotten that far in our design yet, and anything we do has to be approved by the town. So I would love to say, yes, we're gonna do that, but we haven't gotten that far in the design yet, and that's why it's good to have these conversations now, so that we can work together, so that it's.
So they haven't even made one of these facilities yet, guys.
We,
Yeah.
we have sites in Texas, Canada, and California. Just we haven't done it here yet in this community.
And every facility is different. It utilizes different batteries, different inverters, and the different manufacturers emit different levels of sound. So that's why you have to do sound models for each specific site. And so you understand kind of what sound levels are at the sensitive areas of the site. So that will definitely be modeled, and we appreciate your concern. We hear you. And so we want to make sure that that is definitely taken into consideration while we do our modeling.
If they have a building within 350 feet of the work that's all.
We're building
Likely.
one right now in Boston and in Chelsea that are.
Oh, yeah.
So a city, a city is totally different than our rural community.
I just answered the
Yes,
question,
okay.
yes.
So we will look at that process thoroughly. We'll utilize third-party, peer review. We'll look at decommissioning. You know, I don't want to get into the details right now, because our process is just to move it forward. But if this is approved, it's a lengthy process.
Yeah.
And it'll be very thorough on behalf of the board, the other boards in town.
So for clarification, just, you're saying move this forward, that the intent of this
To
meeting is
move
to
it
have,
forward to the town meeting.
but that, it is already going to town meeting.
Correct,
There will be a vote tonight by the planning board whether or not to recommend or not recommend.
correct. Thank you for clarification.
But whether it's recommended or not recommended, it's still going to town meeting. This
Correct.
is the process that has to take place for a zone change. So I just want to make it clear that there's not a vote to move this forward to town meeting or not move it forward to town meeting.
I recommend it.
So just
Maybe,
be clear.
maybe you went through the town meeting process, but then for the residents, can you go through? If this did go through town meeting and this did get approved, the process to do the permitting, could you touch upon that for the residents so they can understand a little bit about what the process would be if it gets through town meeting, and if it does, what's gonna happen after that, if it does go in that direction?
Good suggestion, Phil.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree.
Yes, so what this article is essentially to allow the zoning, similar to what we were discussing with the MBTA. So it's to allow the zoning. There's no approval for this project. It just allows the zoning because Bellingham doesn't have any zoning specific to battery energy storage. So if this gets approved at town meeting, it now will require, if a developer, whether it's you folks or another developer, wants to come in with a project, now they have strict guidelines that they have to follow, which in this case would be special permit and development plan approval through the planning board process. With this additional requirements regarding the public safety as well as a few additional requirements for, lighting and access and such. Now, one thing I do want to note, because I thought it was a very good question, about the runoff, to your site. So as part of the development plan approval process and part of the special permit process, we, as the planning board, I am the planner, I'm not on the planning board, just so you're aware. But we look at the Massachusetts stormwater standards. The Wetlands Protection Act can sometimes come into play with us, but that's Conservation Commission, which might trip something here. And then there's also our local zoning bylaws and our stormwater regulations, which are in our local ordinances, which are above and beyond state requirements. Now, one item to mention with this that I think it will be looked at if this were to go forward. There is a clause in the Massachusetts state stormwater regs for something called a land use high potential pollutant load, or LUPL. That is for specific uses that might emit certain pollutants. A lot of industrial sites fall into this category. Sites with high traffic fall into this category. And there are certain requirements for the stormwater management system that would have to be met in order to get the approval. Sometimes it's containment, sometimes it's specific treatment, and this is something this is a new technology, and luckily, the stormwater standards are set forth by DEP, Department of Environmental Protection. So we have the resources to go, our local DEP stormwater rep, to state, what are your recommendations? Because is this considered a land use high potential pollutant road or level site? So I just wanted to make that clear, because that has come up a lot in our planning processes. Usually our warehouses fall into that category. Anyway, I'm going off on a tirade here. Hopefully that clarifies the process for permitting.
Unless there is any other questions, entertain a motion from the board, right?
All right. What do we do?
So
Need
this
to make a
would be,
recommendation.
it would be a vote to recommend or
Recommend.
not recommend to fall town meeting.
Move to make a recommendation to.
Do I have a second?
I will second that.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor made and seconded. Any further discussion? I'd like to call for the vote. Now, again, this is just recommending it to town.
Nick, aye.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye.
Bill, I.
The motion passes unanimously. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for attending. We have some more business to do.
Just one other point, we will be having a community meeting, most likely at the senior center fairly soon, and we will put that on our website, also on our Facebook page. So there'll be a lot more information coming in regard to it, as well as the question about other sites. As I say, Abe was not here tonight, and he does have some locations. I appreciate it.
We have that before the town meeting.
That will be the goal.
It's a majority vote, same thing?
Yeah.
Town meeting, I believe it's 2/3.
I'm sorry.
It's It's a majority vote for the first.
For MBTA, it's simple majority, and then yes, Dennis.
This is when we zoning changes.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your questions.
I don't know if anybody wants to talk.
What a great.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't have a card.
I have some more business to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate some more business.
I was just trying to get.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead, call him.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm here.
That's right.
So. Sorry, were you looking for the next item?
Yeah, I am.
All right, so then,
Well, I think technically, do we need to open the public hearing for LMA?
no, so they requested a
So we
continuance.
don't have to read those there?
No.
Okay.
And folks, hey, excuse me.
We're trying to conduct a meeting here. I apologize. We still have more business.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I apologize.
No, for this one, so they requested a continuance to November 14th is,
Okay.
which is, let me just make sure I have that right date. Yeah. No, I always get the Concom and Planning Board dates mixed up because I'm always talking about them. So November 14th, which is the next Planning Board meeting, that they've requested a continuance to that date. There's a few town council items that.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, everybody. There's some town council input that we're working towards on our end, so.
That's fine.
Yeah, so it's just a simple vote to, continue.
So moved.
To November
Do I
14th.
have a second?
Second, Nick.
Any discussion? Call for the vote.
Nick, aye.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye.
Bill, I.
Steve, I.
Excellent.
Motion passes unanimous.
All right. The next item, the continued public hearing for Maple Street, that assessors map 37 lots 3 and 3A. That's for the site plan approval. That one's also, they requested a continuance to November 14th. We are waiting on the peer review for that. there's a couple issues, but we're with the peer review
Okay.
situation, so we're figuring that out. So that would be November 14th, another request.
And the dates are also, other dates are set, correct?
What was that?
The dates, the only date we have to change is the meeting date, correct? We don't need an extension.
No, so, sorry, yeah, we have plenty of time, that's in December, so for November 14th, I envision it probably won't be closed out for November 14th, but we can at least get the ball rolling with this and the next public hearing, which I'll discuss in a moment. But what we'll do is we'll get the extension at the next hearing.
I would entertain a motion for the continued public meeting. The continued hearing, excuse me, from Maple Street. Was 3 and 3A. Do I have a motion?
To November
To
14th.
November 14th. Do I
Second,
have a second?
second, Nick.
Any discussion? Made and seconded?
A quick question. Do we have a lot of things going on?
Yeah, November 14th is gonna be pretty busy. However, really, there's two items that are going to be new for it. But knock on wood, I feel that the conversations can be limited because it's mostly updates for that one. So I actually feel like we might get out earlier than we are tonight for November 14th, even with the.
Well, that's fine.
As long as we keep things structured, so.
Any other questions we can call for the votes or no?
No. Also, we're only meeting once in November, so
Yes,
we kind
let's
of
bear that
have
in
to do
mind.
this, so.
Nick, I.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye.
No,
Steve, I.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right, the next item, that is the new public hearing, same situation. This is for the scenic road and special permit for the, associated with this project. This is new. Similar to what we've done with previous projects like 306 Maple Street, where we wanted to keep everything in line to
Yep.
keep the extension dates and continuances in line. They asked that we do the same thing with this. This is the new portion. So it'd be good for, when this is continued to November 14th, both of these public hearings can be presented at the same time,
Okay,
because it's the same project.
okay.
So they've requested continuance also to November 14th.
So second.
Nick.
Any discussion? Motion made and seconded. Call for the vote.
Nick, I.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye.
Bill, Steve, I.
Motion passes unanimously.
All right.
Before we get to general business, we have a covenant release. It goes back a while at 43 Fox Run Road.
Yeah, so just an update on that. I have the form here. If you remember back in January, you released, this was a covenant release for the neighbor. So apparently Fox Run Road, when that subdivision was approved, there was never a release of lots, apparently. So these will probably be trickling in as people sell their houses on Fox Run Road.
Sir, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I have the release here, which I've already talked to town council. There's no issues. The road's already been accepted. This is from 1989, just for your records.
I remember looking at that development.
Yeah.
88 when I was buying.
So, this needs to be signed, but I would also recommend making a motion to release, it would be 43 Fox Run Road, also known as Lot 28, shown on plan entitled Valley View Estates.
So move.
What he said, correct?
Exactly.
Second, Nick.
So what he said.
Yes.
Any discussions on what he said? Call for the motion. And call for the vote.
Nick, I.
Brian, I.
Bill, aye.
Bill, I.
Steve, I.
That motion passes unanimously.
Excellent.
Have we had a chance to look at the minutes from the past two meetings? I think they were in our drop down box.
Yep. I didn't have.
I'm sorry?
I didn't have.
Okay. We'll have.
Okay, all right.
Okay, we can wait till the next meeting. Anything else?
Sorry, you said there weren't any changes?
No, he hasn't had a chance to review.
No, he said that he doesn't have.
No, I don't have any
changes.
Okay. No changes?
No, no.
I would get a motion to accept, the meetings from, October first.
October first and October tenth. I know one of those,
That doesn't sync up.
well, we had,
that's
Special one.
yeah, remember to, we didn't make the motion to select. board.
Yeah, okay, all right,
Yeah,
okay,
you're correct, it doesn't sync up.
okay.
We're, but you have me as a planner, and
All
I
right,
demand so much of you folks.
you do,
I'm sorry.
okay. Make a motion to approve the minutes, of the special, planning board meeting on October first.
You both.
No, I have to do them separately, I believe.
You can do them both if you
Okay.
want.
And, October tenth,
Okay, Nick,
any discussion? All in favor?
Nick got,
Brian,
Bill, aye?
Bill,
Levi.
Right,
Motion passes unanimously. Entertain a motion to, okay, so move.
second, Nick,
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Nick got.
Bill,
We're adjourned.
excellent.
Want
We have
to
to sign,